I think this is going to be a good episode today. I can already sense it because we're ganging up on Logan about his golf takes. I know that you guys are primed to look uh to gang up on me on my Trevor Story takes. So let's get right into it right now. Talk about the Red Sox bats. Your king, Trevor Story, basically the only guy who is hitting at the moment. Even coming off the games that they have won, they were they were shaky at best, where they had to survive in some cases based on what runs they did get. At the moment, let's see. They are, as a team, hitting 251, on base percentage at 323, OPS plus of 102, which is basically an average lineup, which lines up with their 8-9 record or 9-9. So far this season, they are looking very similar to what they were last year. Win some, lose some. Their offense, has its games here or there where they're blasting off, but they're still doing a lot of dumb things. On the base paths, on defense. Their pitching does not look totally cooked. Sorry, when I say cooked, I know that can be taken both ways. I guess I was saying in the recipe sense, like it seems underdone. Trevor Story, to his credit, he's hitting 311. That's nice. Nothing else about his offensive production is nice. So I will continue with that. 329 on base percentage, still not what I need. 459 slugging, still not what I need. But he's the only guy who's really producing at the moment. So I guess we'll carry that for all it's worth. It's still early, but what are you guys looking at with the Red Sox, starting with the lineup thus far?
Well, you have to think the lineup will hit eventually. Like Duran homered last night. He's one of their lowest OPS guys. Like, I guess, this might be a revisionist take, but a month ago, if we said the Red Sox best offensive player at this point in the year is Trevor Story, what kind of reaction would you have? Like, I probably wouldn't be inclined to think it was a crisis. I'd think it was just Trevor Story having a very um uncharacteristically strong, even for someone who likes him 2 weeks. Um, but that's not how it's gone. I mean, it's kind of a consistency thing. Like every game, there's someone who's popping off. Last night it was Bregman. Like everybody's kind of had their moments. Abreu's had a million of them. But the whole conversation around the lineup going into the season was like, all right, it's finally like 1 through 9. You feel pretty good. There aren't a whole lot of weak spots, and it's just there's zero consistency. So it's like if you get one guy in Trevor Story who's off and running, he's going to get stranded every single time because four guys hitting after him can't make contact at a given point. So I think some of it's just like we're 2 weeks into the season, 3 weeks into the season. It's a small sample size. They're in a bad run. You could take this type of 3 week, 500 baseball run and drop at any point in the season and be kind of concerning. But since there's nothing else to grade it against, that's all we have. So concerning, but still far too early to make any widespread declarations about them.
Interesting move. The goalposts, Trevor Story's goalposts are now in a different room, moved down the street in a different house. We're just gonna keep moving those around because the numbers aren't good enough for Ben's liking, but that's fine. The I think Logan hit on an interesting point that like I think part of the reason you build a lineup that's this deep is that if it is you've got more chances that one guy goes off and like that's actually a good thing theoretically, which I think we kind of saw last night, Tuesday night, whatever night it was, with Bregman, who's by the way been like more or less as advertised, at least offensively.
Yeah,
Defensively, has been an
Bregman's been their best offensive
yeah,
player, to be clear.
which is
It's not a
like
Trevor Story. Yeah.
um but like Bregman being like borderline bad defensively speaks to like the mystery around this team and just the inconsistent start to the season where it's again and you would like to think that a team this talented that has shown glimpses of it from time to time would eventually like over the course of 162 games sync it all up, but like when when the offense is going well the pitching stinks, and when the defense has a clean game the offense isn't good. That's why Tuesday night was such a interesting, not test case study, but just an interesting one sample out of 162 where it's like, oh, this is what they look like when they do all three things right, and that just hasn't happened nearly enough this season. And like that was the thing. And then sometimes they don't happen at all, like on Monday night, and that was Cora's big thing, right? It's like we sucked across the board tonight, and we saw the same thing Friday night in Chicago where they're getting their brains beat in by the White Sox. So like it just hasn't all clicked, and like that's a probably way too simplistic way of looking at it, or maybe letting them off the hook. I don't know how you want to describe it, because like that's it is early, but it's also the middle of April. Like they're 20 games into it, whatever it is. It's like they're better than this, and they should be showing it at this point at a more consistent basis. That's the other thing too. Is like win two, lose two, win two, win one, lose one. Like it's lose three, win one. It's just there's just no rhythm. There's no consistency.
I think though so much of it is why should they be better than this? Like it's funny because like I agree with you.
That's a
yeah. Like why should they be better than this?
That's a
like
fair point.
To tie it back, I don't dislike Trevor Story. I never have. I like him. Like I liked him in Colorado. Everything I've ever offered on Trevor Story is he hasn't stayed healthy for the Red Sox. And when he is healthy, he is not hit. Similarly, Tristan Casas, another guy that for some reason people think I dislike. My thing with Tristan Casas is I'm not confident he can stay healthy because he hasn't stayed healthy, and he also has not produced over a full season. These are facts. Like these are not takes. And that's kind of my thing is when I look at it is like until Jarren Duran had last season, I was not sold on him as, you know, a foundational piece. Then he had last season. And now that like he's had it, I feel confident believing that he can be a productive left fielder for them for the remainder of his contract. Alex Bregman, like I've seen him do it for multiple years. I believe that he can do it. Story, Casas, Rafaela, I have not seen them do it here outside of Colorado for an extended period of time to say, yeah, they can do that. But at the same time, for some reason, I do have this feeling like they should be better than what they are.
If I was going to push back a little bit, I understand it. And again, I don't want every show that I'm on to be a Trevor Story debate, but like, I would say that like the Colorado thing is maybe overstated a little bit. And I do think that's the difference between Trevor Story and, in this example, Tristan Casas, where like even if you want to ding him for doing it at Coors, like Trevor Story has a much better track record and career resume than Tristan Casas does. Like if you want to have the Casas conversation, I think that's totally fair. And I think like honestly, if you want to go back, I saw somebody making this point the other day to like spring training when he's sitting on the bench down in Fort Myers and they ask him if, you know, Mayor Campbell and Anthony should be on opening day roster, and he's like, no, like we've got some dudes up here, and like including himself in that apparently. And it's like, well, go be a dude and do it for more than 2 games at a time. And I think that's the fair, like that. If yes, you want to start talking about those sorts of guys, I think that's far more applicable to this situation than it is for like Trevor Story. Because I also think people like Trevor Story too. So like I do think there's some intangible. Did you watch? By the way, have you watched the Netflix doc at all?
I have watched the first couple episodes. Yeah.
The second episode with like the Trevor Story thing, I thought was pretty telling. And like,
but did you see it? Had you seen that before?
What?
Did
No, I mean like the way that
I just don't understand why Red Sox fans have an affinity for him. Like beyond,
I don't totally
rather
understand
than any other.
But like
player.
it's not what I think. It's my point was about that episode was it's about his teammates and his coaches and the people around him who know him. And so like there is intangible value that he brings that I think is they believe it, right? They believe it exists. And I question if that's there with the other guys that we're kind of referring to here. So I don't
know. I don't know. What was Cora's first quote in that? Remember Cora said, I was actually kind of surprised he dove for that ball. So,
okay, but like
the situation there was, you know, one where you don't really need to dive. So
I mean, like
I'm not saying he shouldn't have dove,
not
but I'm
getting
just
on the
saying
guy
like
for
Wait,
diving at a ball. Like,
So
no,
we're really
I'm not. But I'm saying that, like you're saying, well, his manager and all that. No, his manager. The literal quote in that segment
I
was,
understand. Like
"My
the
first
very one
reaction
specific
was,
thing. I'm
I'm
saying big
surprised
picture.
he dove."
Sure,
Yeah.
fine. I've done a lot of dumb things that people would regret in hindsight too, but they might still think I'm a good guy. And like, so maybe he made one bad defensive mistake or made a dumb play in one game in Anaheim in April or May or whatever it was. But like, I think they saw, especially with him defensively and whatever the intangible stuff is, once he went down, they sucked.
Yes.
And like,
Yeah.
so I think that's legit.
You could never, I mean, he's also in an impossible spot too, because for the faction of the fan base that doesn't have an affinity for him, they think that he's just collecting checks and useless. So if this, like, he hurt himself going above and beyond in April, like, I get that you should be tapping the brakes a little bit more, but isn't this the type of player that, like, everyone has been clamoring that they've lacked? Like, that's what boggles my mind about it, is like, I don't know how much this matters to anyone. I think it varies for each person, but like, I have never questioned Trevor Story's commitment, like, certainly compared to other players. Like, that is a guy who seems genuinely upset about the fact that it took him forever to even get going in a Red Sox uniform. And he also had kind of an unlucky injury on top of that with the dive. Like, again, we can debate the merits of whether he should have even dove for it at
No, we don't need
9 o'clock at night in
all I'm saying is
Anaheim in
I'm
April,
noting that
but
Alex Cora said that in the
yeah,
thing. Okay, go.
which is a fair criticism. Like, yeah, maybe he shouldn't have done that, but at the same time, it's like, I really can't have a dissenting view on that when it's like, well, he got hurt caring about baseball. Like,
Yeah, I also think Core said a lot of other stuff in that episode about Trevor Story and the value that Trevor Story has. So, but like again, if you want to beat on other guys, like that's yeah, like the Cassis thing, I think can't be overstated. Is like for this whole thing to work, like for the utopian version of the next great Red Sox team to exist, he has to hit 30 home runs and drive in 100 runs. Like Roman Anthony isn't as good if Tristan Cassis isn't doing his thing. You know what I mean? Like this full-fledged thing, whenever we get there, which is taking longer than a lot of people probably expected or want, has to have him being awesome. And
yeah.
if it's never going to get to that full thing if he isn't, or unless you turn him in like a pitching through a trade. Like, so until you get there, you are not fully cooked, to use your original thing.
Yeah,
I mean, they're at a massive. I'll just be quick. They're at a massive inflection point with Casas because he clearly wants to get extended too. But it's like, what has he shown you? They could trade pennies on the dollar for Michael Toglia in Colorado, who will hit you 25 home runs and he'll strike out just as much. It's like, I've always had this position with first baseman. You can find a guy who hits 25 homers and strikes out a bunch and pay very little for him. Like, we're hitched to the idea of the illusion of what Casas could be,
and plays better defense than Casas has shown in the last 2 weeks too.
Yeah,
he's a minus on both ends, defensively and offensively. And I think you're absolutely right about the spring training remark about like we got grown men up here, because until that point, a lot of the things that he had said that he had gotten knocked for being, like, let's say, self-centered, I thought there was an inkling of, and I still do too, I think there is an inkling of, he's just trying to be accountable. Like when he said, like, my expectations for myself are super high, and I was like, yeah, that's good. It sounds a little self-centered, but like, it's good that you have high expectations for yourself. But then once he kind of put it in the context of, we have grown men, they belong up here, the Christian Campbell and these guys don't, that's when I was like, wait, I think your mindset might actually not be in like what's the best team, but in what's best for me.
The irony too is like we're 3 or 4 years removed from him taking shit from any guy who's got 5 years of service time for like being a weirdo. And like you know what I mean? Like that whole thing about like this guy who does his yoga in the outfield. What has he ever done in the big leagues? And now he's the guy being like, we got guys who can do stuff in the big leagues. Well, meanwhile, Christian Campbell is like their third best hitter for the entire season. Like last night was the first night he hasn't reached base the entire season. Like that just hasn't aged well.
Yeah, he's becoming Keith Hernandez, who like when Keith Hernandez played, he was a kooky guy, read books and did stuff, and now he's like the greatest gatekeeper, of all time. If
he's just you can't beat
games.
Yeah.
Can I raise one point about Bregman's defense sucking?
Yes.
Kind of kind of a funny layer with Devers. Like you'd think if they let him keep his glove ready, they probably could trot him out there, right? Like you could like the comparison that's coming to mind is like, and this is certainly not apples to apples, but like the optics were really bad when Jeremy Swayman held out for a long time and then ended up and Bregman's living up with the bat, but when Swayman comes out and is immediately just giving up beach balls after he gets the big deal, like after everything that was made about third base, you would like to think that Bregman wouldn't be like something of a liability over there, which, I am not actually going to just extrapolate a 2 week sample size and say that this otherwise very good defensive player is not holding up his end of the bargain. But that is a very funny layer that the third base defense, it was like, it's Bregman's job, like whatever. And it's like, well, he's displaying the concerns we saw about Devers.
But there is, I do think it's interesting how kind of like a single cog, or in the Red Sox case, two cogs in the infield can kind of mess everything up, because there was one game where Hamilton played second base and they turned a couple double plays that I was like, this is a real infield. And Campbell, I mean, I'm sure he's working over there, but he does not look ready yet. So I still feel really good about the left side of that infield, not really so much about the right side of the infield defensively, but it is like they are working with one guy at the pivot who is like learning the position, and the guy whose main job is to catch the balls over there. Sorry, I lost my video there. Whose main job is to catch the balls over there, are not really confident in they're doing their jobs.
I was just gonna say this probably isn't fair to Rafael Devers, but I still, despite what my eyes have told me through a month of the season, like I still feel more confident.
Oh, absolutely.
Like with a ground ball being hit to Alex Bregman than it would be if Rafael Devers is over there. So like, yeah, that's probably unfair.
If it was Mike Napoli or somebody over there, like I believe that they would, or Mitch Moreland, I believe that some of those errors wouldn't have happened. Whereas with Devers, a lot of times there's no shot for the first baseman.
The ball goes straight into the dugout.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. That riding like 30 feet up the first base line.
That's not actually a contention that they should put Rafael Devers at third or try it out. But it is very funny that was like the number one storyline. Bregman's got errors.
So Bregman's basically been like Devers at third. Like Devers was like not great.
It's a coin flip.
He was never, like. I'm trying to think of an example. I can't even think of one because you just don't stay at third base very long if you are a complete butcher. But it was better than people give him credit for, too. I will say that.
Yeah. I mean, I guess my worry is that Casas ends up like, who's the guy, the Seattle guy? Justin Smoke. Didn't he have like that one incredible year until just the strikeouts, it just became too much of a problem. But I mean, he was a top prospect. He might have been the number one prospect in all of baseball. Yeah,
he was a big prospect. Yeah.
Doesn't help that he was playing in Seattle.
That's true as well.
By the end of it, he would play it everywhere. I'm looking up Casas. Like, I'm actually kind of curious now to see his similarity scores. Through 24. This is the thing, right? Like, I don't. My eyes deceive me then, because through 24, or maybe this is just a bad metric, his most similar players are Morneau, Carlos Delgado, and Matt Olson. It just doesn't feel like it's been that. So
I mean, how much were they playing?
He doesn't seem like the same type of player as Morneau at all. Again, that's might just be my.
That was the weirdest one for me, was Morneau.
Well, so like now I'm looking at it, Morneau kind of sucked. So like that's part of it too, right? Like the funny thing is that's through 25. Through 24. Morneau at 25 ended up hitting 34 home runs, drove in 130 runs, hit 320 and won the MVP. So that if the progression is that linear, that we'll all look like idiots. But
oh god, yeah, if he turns into Justin Morneau or Carlos Delgado,
or Matt Olson,
I love.
I would take him as Matt Olson. Like, I noticed that Chris Davis is fifth on that list, so that's for every Justin Morneau, there's a Chris Davis. So.
That is the one thing to offensively, like they just need to stop striking out so much. They've struck out the most in the
Yeah.
big leagues. Their numbers, their batted ball numbers are very good. They're hitting everything hard when they hit it, but they're just not making enough contact.
Oh,
And
I mean,
Cassis is in that boat too.
I will say of all the concerns though, defense is my biggest. Since Cora's come back in 2021, they have not had a good defensive team. Like every year it is an issue. And this was supposed to be the like, oh, this wasn't going to be a problem. And they're just riddled with errors. And again, like Bregman will probably figure it out. And if Casas can just improve a slight bit, then yeah, that probably brings the error numbers down. But it's just like, is this a Cora problem? Like, is it a personnel issue? Like, why are they always so untrustworthy defensively?
But you look at a guy like Cassis, he's been one of the constants, and that's kind of what we were talking about earlier. Like maybe he's just not what the perception is, or what he's just not evolving
Yeah.
as a player. It's also funny too that we're sitting here talking about the Red Sox and all that ails them, and it's like, yeah, I'm like they got to start making more contact. You're like, you got to start fielding the ball. We haven't even talked about the fact that Tanner Houck has like a 10 ERA, and just
He is broken.
It speaks to there's the widespread inconsistencies that they have.
I mean,
Pitching's an issue too, still.
yeah, I mean, you feel a lot less good about their depth at this point because you've kind of banked on Houck at least being like a number 3, like maybe a number 4, and you still haven't seen Bayo this year. You still don't know what Giolito is going to be on the other side of all this. Like,
well, I don't know. Like, what had happened with Houck? I mean, was it?
I have no idea.
Was it? I don't think like the stuff is not an illusion. I don't know if it's the whole approach. I did think there was one thing that I thought was kind of eye opening in one of those episodes of the Clubhouse where Breslow and Bailey were talking about their approach, and Breslow said something about fastballs, and he said, the most consistently barreled up or hardest hit pitch is fastball. So it doesn't make any sense logically why the fastball is the pitch you throw the most often. And I got to say, like, as someone who's never thrown a major league fastball, that was kind of a alarming thing to hear from him because, like, as a major league ball player, I assume you should know, like, the importance of establishing your fastball.
Yeah.
And, like, the reason it's hit so often is because there's so many of them thrown, and if you don't have a reliable fastball, like all those other pitches don't work as effectively. And that was one of those where I was like, are we getting a little too Ivy League here and a little not as much of guy who pitched in the big leagues for multiple years?
I think both things can be true. Like,
yeah,
you know what I mean? That was interesting. I guess. Again, that's one of those ones where it's like that is 0.1% of the thought process and reasoning that they're doing. So like, I'd like to think it's a little deeper than that, because if you got a guy who throws 9, then so if that's the case, maybe then either they aren't convicted or they've evolved their thought process. Because what did they do this offseason? They got guys who throw gas. It's all fastballs. It's Crochet, Chapman, Bueller, whatever. But like, they made a point. They brought in that. There was I forget who, one of their like advisors or whatever. Now it was one of those kids that came from one of the internet basically, and he wrote a whole thing about like how Aroldis Chapman's biggest weapon is the fact that he can throw a fastball that guys swing and miss at, and like. So maybe they kind of learned from that and were like, well, actually, fastballs do matter, but we can't have, whatever Tanner Houck is throwing out there, because that's been the issue. Is he's getting hit. Like if you can get swing and miss with a fastball, that's elite skill. But everything else, you're in trouble.
Maybe he's tipping or something. Because you're right. Like and I hate to always kind of like go to that whenever a guy's getting lit up, but to Ben's point, like the stuff isn't bad. It's just he's getting knocked around. But I mean, the concern with Houck has always been control. Like it's never been stuff. And I worry that with a guy who has such a sweeping breaking ball that he goes to, like if you're trying to get rid of his fastball, he doesn't really have a whole lot of pitches that you can set your watch to him throwing for strikes. So like beyond all the basic principles of needing to establish the fastball and a good way to put guys away, especially if you throw other junk pitches, it's like that's kind of his way into the strike zone, because that slider, part of the benefit is that it can end up 20 feet outside of the strike zone. So Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that if he doesn't turn it around and then one of Bayo or Giolito just isn't what we expect him to be, like that rotation depth starts looking pretty thin.
Yeah, I've always liked the idea of how as a closer, but like you need someone to start games in order to even get to a closer. So, um, if he's not the answer in the rotation, who who is a better answer there?